Hello, welcome back to the Thriving Inside the Thin Blue Line podcast. I'm your host, Monica Crawford, owner of 50 Fierce and Fit, author of Thriving Inside the Thin Blue Line. Today we have Chris Perry on the podcast, and I will go ahead and let you introduce yourself.
My name is Chris Perry. I grew up a police officer's son. That was during the 70s. My dad was a Cincinnati police officer, canine officer. I then followed in his footsteps, worked for Cincinnati Police from 1998 to 2024. And now I retired for 3 days and started another job as a police officer again. And I'm a senior citizen resource officer for Amberley Village Police Department, which is a small village just north of Cincinnati.
Very cool. Very cool. We'll dive into some of those things for sure. But to start the podcast, like I do with every other guest, let me ask, what does it mean to you to thrive inside the thin blue line?
Being able to navigate what we've all experienced, kind of the dark side of it, the toxic workplace, being able to work through that. And I think one of the things that was really beneficial for me was realizing that when somebody's being really brutal, ruthless, backstabbing, it helped me understand that those people had issues, like some of the similar issues that I had had in the past. And it's not exactly that they hate you or they're really wanting to be that way to you. It's just they're absolutely miserable. Some of those people who doubted me when I first started coming out with all the PTSD talks and really emphasizing how important mental health is inside this job, a lot of haters, a lot of people said some pretty nasty things, most of it behind my back. But once you realize what's really going on there, um, and it's funny because down the road, those people will come to you maybe a year later and they'll say, "Man, how'd you get where you are? What'd you do? How did you get that done?" Like, okay, well, we'll talk about it. Like, I don't hold a grudge. That would be pretty hypocritical of me. Um, but it doesn't mean it doesn't sting when people start throwing, you know, jabs at you like that. It's like, man, what are you doing this for? But then when you sit down and you think about it, once you get that under control, then you can thrive. But
Yeah.
before that, we all just beat each other down. And it's like, yeah, you can work together, you can get things done on the street, but like personal relationships, a lot of times it's not there. When it's a toxic environment, nobody in that agency likes each other. And that's really not the way to get the job done.
Right. 100%. I agree with all of that. So, to summarize, you're saying thriving to you means working through those challenges as far as more of the dark side of law enforcement, that what's not talked about as far as the trauma that we all experience, whether it's relational trauma inside the PD or where you work or on the street with the call load and what you're dealing with.
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of stuff was more stressful, than anything I dealt with on the street. Like in one of the situations I went through really early in my career, the moral injury. And I think you and I have talked about this in the past, but the moral injury did more damage to me than the physical injuries. And the physical injuries were pretty substantial, but the moral injury hung on for a long time. And that's something that once that trust is broken, it's nearly impossible to ever get it back. So,
Yeah. So would you mind giving an example of what one of those moral injuries were for you and how you worked through that?
so I was working plainclothes one night looking for people that were breaking into cars, and I approached a group of people that were assaulting another man. It was like 5-on-1, and they were stomping, kicking him. One guy jumped up on the bed of the tailgate of a pickup truck, jumped out, stomped on this guy. So I went in to break it up, and I ended up getting attacked. Uh, my head got split with a beer bottle, um, traumatic brain injury, 12 staples in my head. The effects of that lasted quite a while. Other, injuries from getting kicked, stomped, choked. They tried to get my gun, rip my vest off, and then one of the actual guy that was the primary person that committed the assault was related to a high-ranking officer in the agency that I worked for then, and it went kind of sideways after that. Um, yeah, so I saw what was really going on, and I saw that people would prioritize their own personal goals over the actual crime that had occurred. So it was like they totally turned the tables on it. And we went to court, and it was a 2-day trial, and the person was acquitted on all charges. And then I was, throughout that whole thing, there was witness intimidation, towards me. And then, yeah, it's just the whole story would fill up more time than we have. But it was that just blatant organizational betrayal and the moral injury, because like I grew up a cop's kid, so police officers and firefighters, or really anybody in uniform, was my hero. And now I was doing my job, doing the right thing, and then the tables are turned. I realistically, when I think about it, I don't know why I stayed in law enforcement after that. After that, it was probably a year after I came to work for Cincinnati PD, and that was a much different organization. Just to clarify to anybody that's listening, like that incident did not occur in Cincinnati. I had a great career in Cincinnati. It wasn't trauma free, but I never experienced organizational betrayal or any kind of moral injury that I would say was like impactful. Plenty of trauma, but nobody in the agency ever treated me bad. But I mean, once is enough. That's it.
Yeah. So it sounds like essentially, I mean, you're showing up, you're doing the hero type thing or thing that you've in your mind has seen as heroic as a child. And then essentially you're fighting your own, who you're working for after that whole incident goes down. On top of that, dealing with your own mental and physical injuries from the whole
Mm-hmm.
thing, which I can't even imagine. That sounds pretty horrific, if I'm being honest. Um, so at that point in your career, what steps did you take after all that happened?
Well, during that same time frame, it was probably maybe 6 months later, we lost an officer in the line of duty that I was good friends with. So I really didn't have any time to process what was going on with the first part. And then there's the line of duty death. Then all the stuff that comes with that. Um, one of those, the line of duty death has such an incredible impact on an agency. I don't think a lot of people outside of this don't understand how devastating that is. And it's the ripple effect. It goes to your wife, your kids, your husband, your parents, your in-laws. Everybody feels it. And it's the thing is we know it happens, but it's just absolutely devastating. I don't know if any other word I could use to describe it accurately. It changes the entire game. You'll never look at it the same, and you will never be the same. Um, so I was brought up in the generation where, what did you do when you face those situations? Well, and I quote, just bury it, kid. You know, the whole rub the dirt on it type mentality. And you can do that, but it's not going to do anything good for you. And if you bury it, it's coming back out of the grave at some point. You can bet your you can bet your pension on that. It's coming back. And when it rears its head, who knows when it's going to be. Maybe it'll blow up during your career, and then you'll get divorced and lose all of your stuff, and then your kids don't like you. Maybe you pick up some kind of you know addiction throughout the process, and now everything that you've worked for and everything that you believed in is now destroyed because we didn't address a problem that we could have solved. Now, granted, back years ago, the resources weren't there. As let me say, they were there, but not as readily available, and people didn't really understand what's going on. So I get it. I get why it happened. But like today, there's no excuse for not doing that. And I can't I can't see why any agency wouldn't back mental health for their first responders. I think that's just abuse and neglect if they don't, and especially in today's world because people argue with me over it, but this generation has it worse than any generation in the history of policing, in my opinion. And it's a tougher job to do now than it's ever been. So they're under a heck of a lot of stress. I do a lot of work in peer support, so I get a lot of those calls. Um, One of the good things about the younger cops and firefighters is I had one the other day. It's been on the job like a year and a half, and this person called me and told me what's going on, and they said, "But I'm going to go see a therapist about this because I don't want to end up like fill in the blank." And I was like, "Damn!" I was like, "That's fantastic." And I told this person, I said, "Man, I'm extremely proud of you." I said, "I know you're going to be successful with it because you get it, you understand, and you don't want those things to happen, but you've realized what can happen." And that's something I wish so many of us in the past would have been able to do because I've seen the fallout from it. I mean, look at our suicide numbers right now. It's and I can think offhand, like maybe 8 people I know throughout my career that took their own lives. And then the negative things that were said about them after that happened, so then you're reinforcing the belief that we shouldn't, seek any kind of help. It's it's ridiculous. It's I'm glad it's fading. I'll say that, and it's fading because there's a whole lot of people that are doing a hell of a lot of work.
Right. So you had the major critical incident. You've dealt with a direct line of duty death, and then also seen other suicides happen throughout your career. When you were in that time where you had that incident and then 6 months later that line of duty death, at what point did you realize like, hey, I need to address this? Or what does that healing journey look like for you from that point forward?
So I pretty much buried it as best as I could, and I had a wedding coming up. Um, I had a house that I bought. It's the first time ever owning a house. I had those expenses, and I was focusing on getting ready for the marriage, planning our life together, and it was probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 years down the road, the marriage got bad. Um, it was 100% my fault, and things went sideways, and we got divorced. And like I said earlier, I lost everything that I had. And the wheels kind of just fall off of life. And then, encountered things like my mom got breast cancer. Different horrible things happened to friends. People, grandparents dying, and you think you're navigating it, but you're not. So, to kind of cut to the chase, 22 years later is when I actually sought help.
Wow.
So when I tell you that, the wheels fell off the bus, they did. And I can tell you my professional life, it was good. I worked hard, I did a good job, but my 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 personal life was terrible. Professional life was good. I was doing a good job, and people were always happy with the work that I did. I had great assignments. I never got in trouble, but personal life is an absolute disaster. I couldn't keep a relationship. Risk-taking activities. I started racing motorcycles. Had a mentality of like, I'm not afraid of death. I don't care what happens. You know, so like you're having those suicidal thoughts, but not like, you're not intentionally trying to do it. But if it happens, it happens.
Right.
And so it got to a point where I ended up. It kind of felt like over the years it was kind of like ebbing and flowing, and I got remarried, and everything was really good for about 2 years, maybe a year and a half. And then I started losing the ability to have healthy emotions. And there was never any abuse, verbal or physical, but it was bad enough because I wasn't present, which is bad enough. It's going to, soccer games, football games, baseball games with the nieces and nephews and stuff, and I would just stay home. It's not because I wanted to stay home, and it's not because I didn't want to be there with my wife. It's just I couldn't do it. I didn't have the ability. I had nothing left because I was holding it all together at work. Because, well, number one, I didn't want to, disappoint my dad, especially because he was a retired police officer. I didn't want to, shame the profession or the department. So I just grind it out. And I did that with everything. I did that with my physical health, you know, my work life. It was 100%, you know, go, 100% go into the work, get the work done. Don't take any time for yourself. This isn't about you. It's about the job. And then in my personal life, had nothing left. So for thinking it was about 16, 17 years of being with my current wife before I got any help. And she saw it probably, well, after my mom got breast cancer, years later, she ended up getting dementia. And that was terribly navigated by me. And then right after that, my partner in the motorcycle unit got a brain tumor, glioblastoma, and he died probably about a year after that. So it was loss after loss. And then just like the light started to fade, I had no desire to work anymore. And all I wanted to do was retire, totally just checked out in personal life and professional life at that point. Just barely getting by. Doing the bare minimum was like climbing Mount Everest. And my wife saw it. She would put out little, I guess, hints or suggestions, but I just had that attitude. It's like, you can't understand what I'm going through. And then, of course, I did what we all do is we don't tell our spouse what we need or what we want or how we're really feeling. And then we don't share the horrible experiences that we have while we're working because we want to protect them when ultimately that's not what you're doing. Um, but in 2020 came the PTSD diagnosis. I pushed through that and then started the rebuilding process. And I can tell you that was incredibly difficult, but it was so worth it. And at this point in my life, I'm better than I've ever been, even better than I was when I was, a kid. And I got confirmation from that from my dad because he asked me, he said, "What changed in you? How are you so different now? Like you were never this happy. I've never seen you this happy before. What happened?" So I came out and I told him the whole story. That was really tough because I'm thinking old school street cop, canine handler, tough guy. I'm thinking if I tell him all this, what is he going to think of me? But it got to that point where it was like I didn't want to hold it back anymore. That's something I had to do. I had to come out with it,
Mhm.
and I did. And he was proud of me for it, and he understands completely. All of us experience it. There's nobody like if you actually get out there and you do the job, you're going to take damage. That's what's going to happen. We've all lived it. We've all seen it. I don't care if you've been on for 6 months or if you've been on for 4 years. Everybody absorbs some of it. And the longer you're on, every year on is another year of more trauma. And it never stops. So yeah, I mean nobody's immune to it. It's my belief. I think it's how you process it. If you process it really.
Right.
So
Wow, that's quite a story. I mean, it sounds like you had small signs along the way that you recognized that things weren't great. You knew they weren't great. But it sounded like it took your wife really trying to hold up that mirror to you, or at least starting to give you those little nods of, hey, maybe this is something that needs to be addressed. So that's cool, first of all. And obviously I like the point of communicating with your spouse because obviously they're your support system.
yep.
So finding a way to communicate with them, I think many struggle with. Fortunately, well, I had a little bit of trouble with this. We were both law enforcement, but it was for different reasons of I got out of the environment that he was still in and it was causing fights at home because I chose to remove myself and at the time he was choosing to stay. And was still unhappy for those same reasons that I left. Um, Anyways, but communicating with your spouse and having a way to have that dialogue open, even when it's stuff you don't want to talk about. I mean, obviously you don't have to give them the gory details of some things you might see, but it could be, hey, I had a bad call. It involved a small child, or insert X, Y, and Z. Like, I feel like that's all they need to know, honestly, to at least get the idea of this sounds like a shitty situation. I probably don't want to know all the details of what was seen. I get the gist of it enough to have empathy for you and support you through it. So, with that PTSD diagnosis, what therapy did you work through to help work with that and heal from that?
Cognitive processing therapy, and it was incredible. And I looked at things in a completely different way. There was homework involved with it. Um, I was never a good student. I never liked school. So when I was given homework through this therapy, I was like, this is this isn't going to go well. But I started seeing little improvements, and that gave me the inspiration to really go deep into this. And I did, and I worked harder on that than anything I've ever done before. And I won't say the results were instant, but it was progress that I could see. Even a little step is a huge thing once you start getting healthy emotions again. And it's scary at the same time because you don't know, like, you've been so emotionally dead for so long. When you start to feel emotionally alive, it's very foreign, and you don't know, like, if you've really just regressed, because if something brings tears to your eyes, is that normal? Because what's normal? Like, your normal being emotionally dead is, I can't even really describe it. It's like you're a machine. So when you do start to feel healthy emotion again, and you do start to feel affection for somebody again, it's something to navigate. I think it's best you don't try to do that alone. You know, find a support system, or if you have a therapist that you get along with really well, bounce those things off of them. That's what I did. I'd call my therapist and say, hey, I saw this, or, you know, I held a brand new little baby, and it made me get tears in my eyes, and I felt love for the kid. And I'm like, man, am I getting soft, or, like, is this what you're supposed to do? So it was what I was supposed to do. And now I embrace that. It's not like I go running around crying and sniveling over everything, but it's something good, something beautiful. I love it. Like, I love sunrise and sunsets. They're two of the biggest things in my life. Both of those things mean the world to me. It's taking in those natural, beautiful things that don't cost anything. It's what I was looking for so long, but then everything got in the way. But man, once you get there, it's a fantastic place to be.
Yeah. I like that you bring up the sunrise and sunset because that's something that's being about very present about where you're at. And like you said,
Yep.
you were forced to somewhat hide from that before because you had nothing left to give other people or other situations unless it was your job. So even just seeing the beauty of what's in front of you, I mean, that tells your transformation essentially of like I was emotionally dead and now I look forward to the sunrise and the sunset. Like to me,
Yeah.
that's a huge thing.
So what I do is, obviously I'm not a doctor, but I've lived the life and experienced the worst. So anybody that through peer support that contacts me, and I form a relationship with them, I will point things out to them like sunrise and sunset. And a lot of those people, and then one person in particular, I get up pretty early, and I'll take pictures of the sunset, sunrise, and I'll send a picture to a lot of these people that I've helped through the process. And now it's like we're all in a race to see who can get the picture sent of the sunrise or sunset. But when you see that the first time from somebody that's really put in the work, and they're rebuilding their life, and they send you that, that is like the coolest experience you can get. Because they'll ask you, because it's a lonely journey. It doesn't have to be, but it's so uncomfortable. You don't know who you can trust, and you can be vulnerable with. But once they know that you're there for them and you won't betray them, and they can open up and you can work through things with them. And then they'll say, well, how will I know if I'm getting better? And I always tell people, it's like, you're going to start seeing things you've never seen before. Well, like, what am I going to see? I said, you're going to see beautiful things you've never seen before. And then all of a sudden I'll get a picture of a sunrise or a sunset. Now I know what you mean. That's what you meant by seeing things I'd never seen before. I said, yeah. I said, you're on your way. You're not finished, but you're on your way. And God, getting somebody there, there's nothing in the world I'd rather have. You could offer me $5 million to get to, forget all those victories that I've experienced with people, and I tell you to keep your money. I don't need. I mean, that it sounds crazy to some people, but money does not make you happy, not in any way. You know, you got to pay your bills and all that, but ridiculous amounts of money that's not going to bring you joy, not going to bring you happiness, it's not going to bring you peace. Material things, that's not what material things do. And I did that whole thing was trying to buy happiness by buying new motorcycles all the time and doing this and that and buying the best of everything. It did nothing for me. But this is what I'm doing now is everything. I couldn't be in a better place. I couldn't be happier. I couldn't be more at peace. And one of the questions I get asked is, aren't you bitter about those 22 years that you, quote unquote, wasted? Those years weren't wasted, in my opinion, because those years built who I am today. And I would not have been able to get where I am today without going through the hell of the past. So it was all for a reason. And it gave me every skill that I need to help other people. So I'm all about it. I literally don't regret any of that. Not at all. Forgiveness was a big piece of that. I was able to forgive everybody involved in the bad situations. Even when you are able to forgive somebody that was, trying to kill you, you know, choke you, hit you in the head with a bottle, try and run you over with a car. That was a different incident, but yeah, I forgave everybody for that. And the reason it clicked in my head, I'd been told it multiple times how important it was to find forgiveness. But I was driving home from work. I think it was like maybe a year and a half ago. And all of a sudden it just popped in my head. I said, why am I still holding on to this? Like the only person paying a price for this is me. This is ridiculous. And it really was that easy once I understood. It took a while to sink in. But when it did, it was easy. I was like, why am I doing this? There's no reason for this. Like I felt I was about 75% where I needed to be, but I just couldn't make any more progress. And then once forgiveness came into the picture, then I was 100% that quick. So that's a massive part of a full recovery.
Yeah, for sure. I've walked through that myself, as far as trying to let go of the experiences I had within the toxic work environment I was in. And it's tough. It's like, well, they did X to me. And so now you feel like you've been wronged. But then that's also like the victim mindset still,
Mm-hmm.
of allowing them to control your emotions and being at fault of what they, or being at effect of what they quote unquote did to you versus
Mm-hmm.
being a cause for your own life, saying, well, I'm not going to let them affect me any longer. Like I'm in control of my life and this is how I'm going to let that go. And now I'm looking at the sunrises and the sunsets of the world, which is cool to me. You say that too, because like my picture is like a beach. So that fits. It's sunny, it's warm. Like when I think of bright things, it's the beach. So you hit on two things that are big credos of mine as far as you're one decision away from a totally different life. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
in 2020, you made that decision of I'm done with this shit. I'm done with the past. I'm going to heal. And because of that, you're in a peer support role, which the other credo is we rise by lifting others, but first we must lift ourselves. So you walk through that healing process, and now you're able to help others walk through their own healing process because you've been there, you've done that, you know what it's like, and then you can help guide others through it, which is so cool to me. How did you, or I guess, was there an event that happened that really helped you walk into that peer support role, or how did that evolve from where you were?
Uh, so what? what led to the diagnosis was an anonymous survey. We took an in-service class, and the wellness coordinator was a lady named Tiffany Galvez, and she did this survey, and I took it. I took it honestly. Why? I have no one to credit but God Himself, because it was divine intervention for me to have done that. That got me into therapy. That got me on the good side of therapy. That got me into the rebuilding process. And then I think a lot of times when people go through an experience like that, you see how good life can be, and you see others suffering, and you want to do whatever you can to help pull those people out. And that's what it is. I mean, it's like, I'm still a sworn police officer, but through the peer support stuff, it's like you're still doing like hero type work, like you're rescuing people and pulling them out of a pit, which ultimately can lead to their own death. Um, I didn't want first responders to suffer like that. I didn't want their families to suffer. I didn't want their kids to grow up not, having the parent that they should. So I mean, that was the whole reason. I wanted to get back because I know when I look at those people that are not nice people, I know why they're not nice people, and I know they can be fixed. So their quality of life is at stake. Their actual life is at stake. So let's do something. Let's hit it head on and go through it. And that's why I told you, like before we started the podcast, like nothing's out of bounds. Whatever you ask me, why would I hold it back? Because I'm cheating everybody else that could learn from the bad and stupid things that I did, the things I didn't do. So you can learn from my bad experiences, and then that makes it a positive that's come from a negative, which is, I think, how you should look at everything.
Yeah.
It works. It just works.
Yeah. So what are some of the systems or programs that you all have in place within peer support, and what does that look like for your department?
So we're in a group that's in a police association, and there's all the counties surrounding Cincinnati are in the Hamilton County Police Association. So that peer support group has started. We do things like post critical incident um, debriefs, and then we'll get with people individually that get referred to us and work with them on a personal level. And we do different presentations, trainings. Uh, it's pretty new for the police association, but it's amazing with the younger people that come into it. It spreads like wildfire, because they realize how important it is. There's not a lot of people that are in my generation, which, Generation X, and I'm going to be 53 years old. Like it wasn't a thing for us. So
Mhm.
there's not a lot of us, but the ones that are involved, I say by far, are people that are definitely in it for the right reasons. Because if you don't want to admit it, I don't know why, but it is our responsibility to foster the next generation and give them the best tools that they can have to succeed. I mean, I just feel that that's my responsibility. You know, as a human being, not only as a police officer, but as a human being, you're supposed to help people through life. That's how you prevent mistakes and give them the wisdom that was given to me over the years, but I never listened, because life just sucked and this is just part of the job. This is the way it is. That was the mentality I had. That doesn't do anybody any good, and it's just absolutely dead wrong.
Yeah. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna get my dog to stop barking. Pause. Three fur kids. Somebody at the door. You know how that goes. I love that you're reaching out to help other people. I mean, it's like you said before, I think. Where is it? I wrote it in my notes. You said you didn't mind if people were your haters in the past. To me, when you said haters, I think of people who are triggered, like triggered by something that you're doing or what you have to say, because I've had some of them too, where I'm like, whoa, pause for a second. I had a public speaking event where they said, don't pitch your diets to help solve my mental health problem or help or tell me that I can get off meds or something to that effect. And I was like, meh. Like, nutrition can help improve your mental health. Yes, I'm not selling it as an end all be all solution because I realize that mental health is a multi-layered thing. But again, I was like, ooh, you got triggered a smidge but something was said.
Right.
So in the same light, I think that's cool where you're like, I don't hold grudges. I understand that people are a reflection of themselves, not really you, which is that's a thing that I had to come to terms with too, as far as the people I dealt with, of like they're just miserable people and it's sad. Um, the other statement you said about it's not about you, it's about the job and just your mentality of it. I see that a lot on the internet. I see a lot of guys with that on the internet coming at me, shaming me for the X, Y, and Z of saying, well, you're not cut out for the job, or it's a good thing that you left. Things like that. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, and of course, it's usually the people who have 20 plus years on who have been around for a while. And I'm like, I'll pray for you because I feel like you're just miserable right now. Because you don't know anything about me and my situation, who I am, other than a 10-second reel on Instagram. Um, so that stuck out to me when you said you had that mentality of, well, it's not about you, it's about the job. So, and I see that in real life examples too.
Yeah. I mean, when I would see people, you know, post or pre PTSD diagnosis, I'd see people leave the job and I would just think, their heart wasn't in it or whatever. I mean, I couldn't have been more wrong, and I'm not saying that my way of thinking was right, but that was the culture. The culture reinforced that. Once you leave, like you're excommunicated, like you betrayed the profession. You're no longer one of us. Uh, why do you care what that person chooses to do with their life? It's not your business. Like I don't know, maybe they wanted to go back to school and become a doctor. Why do you care? Wish them well. Say, hey, you did a great job when you're here. I really like working with you. I'm sorry, I'm going to miss you, but stay in touch if you ever need anything. Get with me. Instead, you say, oh, they were whatever term you want to use. Coward, whatever. Why? It's. But I think a lot of times it's motivated by people that really want to get out, but they can't figure out how to do it. Because there were times like my in-laws would kind of heavily suggest, like, why don't we look around, see if there's some other job you could do or something else you're interested in. But I was so comfortable in the misery, I couldn't even think about getting out. It just didn't seem like a possibility. And then, like looking back, I mean, no matter what job I would have gone to, I would have been miserable because it was up in my head. It wasn't tied to the profession completely. And it's the same thing with people that get ready to retire, with that mentality of as soon as I retired, I moved to Florida or wherever they move, it'll all be better. And I've said to them before, I see things so different now. But I said, you do realize this isn't geographical. Like this is in your head, and your body carries the trauma and the stress. So when you get to Florida, you're still going to have it, but you're going to be in a place where you're supposed to be at rest and finally find peace, but you're not going to find it. So let's address this now so you can actually have a good retirement and not die. What is it? What we die like 3 to 5 years after retirement? Like all the hell you've been through, you deserve way more than that. But I think the average age that we die is like 57. That's insane,
Yeah.
ridiculous. Go into therapy, get it figured out. Maybe you have survived the whole career and you don't have any damage. That's awesome. I think that's extremely rare, but great. I think that's awesome for somebody to have made it through unscathed. I don't really think that that's a thing, but why not get it handled so you can enjoy your post retirement life?
Yeah.
It's there and it's possible, and it doesn't take that long to get out. And when you do, you won't regret it.
Yeah. I can get on a huge soapbox about that of people feeling stuck where they're at. And actually you hit the nail on the head with saying being comfortable in the misery. I
Yeah,
think that's the biggest thing that keeps people stuck because it's, well, this is what I know. This is predictable. I might know I'm going to get shit on next week or written up in an IA the following week or shot at or whatever. It's predictable, but it's keeping your body in that state of chaos because it is predictable. And then they're like, well, what happens if I go somewhere else? What am I if I'm not a cop? Like, what do I do? What does this look like? And even for me, when I was trying to leave my agency, it was, well, the pay is too good, the benefits are too good, the retirement's too good. What are you gonna do? You're gonna lose it all. False. I still have every penny I contributed to my pension. It's still in my bank account. It's being invested in a different way than it was within the pension, but guess what? It's still there. So I think it's almost those self-limiting beliefs that we somehow either internalize or we hear from other people that keep us stuck. And then of course, if you're in that negative environment, it's just reinforcing the trauma that you already have, I feel like.
Yeah. It's just the hamster wheel of trauma. And it's just every day that you go to work, it's the same thing over again. Like seeing the incredibly horrible things, and you just get used to it. It's just how life is, which is totally not accurate in any way. And people ask me why I stayed in the one area that I worked in so long. And my father-in-law brought it up after he heard another podcast I did, and he's like, now I understand. He's like, I heard you in that podcast say you were comfortable in that misery. And he said, another thing I remember you saying is that you couldn't leave that area because you would miss the adrenaline rush. And then I started putting things together, and it's like you kind of go back in time and kind of dissect things that happened. Well, that adrenaline rush was necessary because that's the only thing I could feel as far as like what resembled any kind of emotion. That being really in the middle of a shit show where it was adrenaline pumping stuff. But then after a while, as everything progressed with PTSD, then I stopped losing that. And that's when things got really dark. I mean, when you can make an emergency run and your pulse doesn't go up, you don't get that adrenaline dump anymore. That's the weirdest feeling. It's scary as hell because you think, what is wrong with me? And you'll lie to yourself. You'll say, oh, no, I've just been doing it for so long. I'm used to it. It's not really that big of a deal. But then you look around and everybody can feel it and you can see it. And then you have to fake it. It's just, it's a very, very damaging thing to experience, and then basically you lose yourself, you know. But the positive thing is you can get yourself back.
Yeah.
So thank God that's a thing. And we have so many therapists that are, competent or culturally competent that you can sit down with them and tell them a horrible thing and they're not going to freak out, run out of the room, and, I tell people all the time, I was like, you're not going to tell them anything they haven't heard before. So don't think you unloading on them is going to hurt them in any way because it's not. And I know that for a fact because I have a lot of friends that are doctors and we talk about it. You know, and I have one friend of mine that she's a doctor, absolutely amazing human being. Um, we call each other to vent. And if she has a day, and things aren't going right or whatever, she'll vent to me and I vent to her. And a lot of these people in this circle do that because we all know that it works, and you have multiple people you can count on. And we just all take care of each other because it's hard work to take care of so many people, in the first responder world. And now it's getting more popular. Uh, there's a huge need for it, and there aren't enough people doing the work. Um, but just to see it progressing is really motivating for me. And like when I told you, like you hear some of the younger people will say things like, yeah, I'm going to go to a therapist. I'm going to make this appointment because I'm just not feeling right. I'm like, God, that is so awesome. Like, I admire you guys so much for doing that. They're so far ahead of the game where we were in the Stone Ages with it. And it's just a beautiful thing to see. But the reason that that's happening is because of all the good work that people in the peer support groups and in the people that are trauma informed and they get it, they understand it. And then there's people like you and I going out there and talking about it and being vulnerable and putting ourselves out there. That's what it takes. And like I said, that's the best part of my career. this is the best part of my career. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's fantastic to have, something tangible where you can watch somebody's expression change. You saw them the first time, they look like they could spit nails. The next time you see them, they're smiling. They're at an event with their kids and they're laughing and playing with their kids and they're happy. It's like, man, I know I didn't do that, but I helped get them where they needed to be that person. And that's just amazing. It makes those 3 a.m. phone calls that you have with some people, it's absolutely worth it. It sucks getting out of bed at 3 o'clock in the morning to talk to somebody, but you know, sometimes it's necessary.
Yeah, 100%. It doesn't pick and choose when the time is to address something, right?
Right.
It's either
Yeah.
there or it's not. So it doesn't discriminate on what hour of the day that is or the night.
Yeah. I mean, if somebody's in crisis, you're not going to look at the phone and be like, nah, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I go back to sleep. I don't do that all the time, but people know. And I've told the people that I've been helping, look, I turn my text tones off at night, but if you need me, call me because then that'll ring. And I know it's serious that you need something. So I
Yeah.
do that.
Within your career and everything you've done up to this point, is there anything that you would have done differently?
If I would have had the ability to see things the way they really were, I would have saved a whole lot more money. But like I said, I was trying to buy happiness. And I mean, I bought so many motorcycles. It was ridiculous. I mean, there was a time when I think I had 12 motorcycles in my garage, you know?
Wow. That's impressive,
Yeah,
actually. Not in a
yeah,
great way, but still.
yeah. And then one of the things that we laugh about it now, but it was really bad at the time. Um, my wife was working out of state and she would go for like 2 weeks and then be back for a week. And then sometimes she'd stay longer and they would fly me to where she was or they'd fly her home on the weekends. So I would fly where she was so we could go see different parts of the country and, do fun things. So I got one weekend I didn't get to go up and I got bored, lonely. I wasn't happy. So I called a motorcycle dealership that was like 2 states away that I bought bikes from before. I said, hey, do you have this bike I'm looking for? Yeah, we got it. So I had already sold one. So I got a green light to go buy another bike. Wasn't happy about it, but I did it. And I'm heading up there and I get there and I see two bikes that I really like and I can't decide which one I want. So I bought two. Yeah. And I thought it was completely cool. She'll be fine with it, right? And I load the bikes up in the truck, and the guy at the dealership, I've been a friend of his for like 15 years. And he looks at me and he says, she's going to kill you. And I was like, nah, she'll get over it. He's like, I'll tell you what, if this goes sideways, pick one of the bikes and don't ride it until you see how this goes. And if you bring it back, I'll take it back. He goes, because this is like divorce material, Chris. I was like, nah, she'll be fine. So I'm not proud of this. This is one of the dumbest things I ever did. But like I said, I don't have secrets, right? So I go driving down the road and I get back into Ohio and she calls and she's like, how's the bike? And they're in the back of my pickup truck and I'm looking in the rearview mirror and I say, they're good. And she's like, what do you mean there? How many are there? I said, two. And she hung up. I didn't hear from her for 2 days. And I thought, wow, dumbass, you did it again. Like and this was before the PTSD thing came about, but like I couldn't not buy them. Like that was my happiness, right? So if I had those two motorcycles, then I'd be double happy, which is completely not true. It caused me more stress. It caused her more stress. It stressed our relationship more, and it's just, and you know what? When I bought those bikes and I brought them home, I didn't like they meant nothing to me, especially after, I realized what a stupid thing it was. Yeah, that's probably something I would change. But like I said, we do laugh about it now. But yeah, yeah. Put it this way, she'll forgive, but she'll never forget that one.
Oh, I'm sure.
And you know what? I don't blame her. I don't blame her at all. I would be seriously pissed, you know, just for the simple fact that you didn't tell me. you're just going to go out and drop that kind of money and not even run it past me. Because at that point in time, you're not a team working together. You're in
Right.
it for yourself. And I wasn't it for myself. I wanted to feel something. I wanted to survive. And I thought that was gonna do it because why? Because she couldn't understand what I needed, but that's not what I needed. That wasn't what I needed at all. But that's the importance of expressing how you're feeling, what you're experiencing. You know, had I told her, how bad I felt and everything, she would have been able to sit down with me and say, you can't buy your way out of this. Like these material things are not going to make life better, not in any way. You're going to be in more debt. You're going to have more stress. And at the time, I didn't have time to ride that much.
Hmm.
But that was what I thought I was doing was like therapy. But what it was really doing was just me going out and pushing the limits to try and scare myself and make myself feel something. And that's all it was. So, I still ride motorcycles, but it's a completely different situation now. I do it literally now. I do it to relax, to have fun. We'll jump on a bike and go out and spend a day in the country, riding on 2-lane country roads and just taking in the sights. And it's great. And there's nothing where I feel like I have to get an adrenaline hit from accelerating or going, this, whatever. It's, I look back at it now, hindsight's always 2020. And you look back now and you think, wow, that's pretty stupid. But you know what? At the time, it was what I was doing that I thought was right. And I thought it was the way I could survive. But then with that, I didn't really want to survive. It's such a horrible place to be because there's really no security. You're not grounded in any way. You just become like a machine. And
Yeah.
that's probably the darkest period that I could ever imagine that anybody can really go through is when you lose the ability to feel emotion. And that'll actually affect your ability to feel pain. Because your emotions are gone. You don't fear death and you don't fear pain. So can you imagine, like, rhetorical question, can you imagine living with somebody like that you're supposed to have a relationship with? What's in it for that person? Nothing good. They may still love you, but do you really love them back? Because you don't even love yourself. So that's the whole thing behind it for me as far as the relationship parts go and how important it is to tell your person what they mean to you and what you need from them, and so then they can look at things in a way you can trust this person. They're like, look, something's not right with you. You're not like you ever were before. You're not doing the things you used to do. That you're not helping me. You're not, you know, affectionate. Which, I mean, I grew up with affection. That was a thing, and then I got to the point where I didn't like it. I didn't like people to touch me. It was especially like from my neck up. Like if somebody touched my face, it was not going to go well at all. I hated people touching my face. Um, and that, of course, that's where the majority of the trauma came in my head, my face. So it wasn't something that I consciously thought of, but as somebody moved towards my face or went to touch me, I'd jerk real fast. And then it was like you go into fight or flight mode, like you're ready to knock somebody out. And that was another horrible experience going through that all the time.
Yeah, that makes sense. What would be maybe 1 to 3 pieces of advice that you would give anybody who's going through something similar?
The number one thing I'll tell you is do an honest, no bullshit assessment of yourself and be brutally honest with yourself. And then when you're doing that, look at your habits that you had before when you thought you were healthy, or maybe you were actually healthy at that point. But look at those things that you did that brought you joy. And then if when you look at that and you look at what you're doing now and you say, well, I used to do this, I used to do this, I used to do that. Why are you not doing it anymore? Look deep into that. Why is this happening? And be honest. Of all people not to lie to, don't lie to yourself. Um, so there's the assessment, being honest with yourself, looking at the things that you think bring you joy. And if you're not doing them anymore, um, and you know, don't skip the vacations, and I would say that in one of the there's so many things I could recommend, but um, it's realize the separation between your personal and professional life. And I didn't listen to this. My dad told me this when I started my career, and he said, "Chris, make this what you do, not who you are." And I think that's why he was so good throughout his career. I mean, he took a lot of damage as well, um, throughout his career, but he never was one of those people that wore his profession on his sleeve. Like, he didn't tell people what he did. And when he was at home, I mean, of course, we had a police dog in our house that lived with us, so it was like a constant thing. But he did never dwell on what he does at work. He didn't hide it, but he didn't dwell on it either. And there was a clear division between when he was a policeman and when he was dad. He was a baseball coach. And, you know, he'd play with us as kids, and we would go on great vacations, and he would keep it separate. And then I got in assignments where my job was part of my life, and it was my whole life. You do, work in a traffic unit as a traffic reconstructionist, motorcycle officer doing escorts, and then when you do narcotics work, highway interdiction stuff. I mean, you're never off. That was your entire life. It's fun. I enjoyed it, but it was really destructive to my life. Um, Not healthy. And that's another reason, I want to get off track, but I really think, and there's people that would be really irritated by this, but I think in, specialized assignments, get somebody on homicide unit or a sex crimes unit or narcotics unit, we have got to rotate people out,
Mhm.
because there's nobody that's going to go through 25 years as a homicide detective and get out of that and be right. Or especially like something like a sex crimes unit, crimes against children. I mean, come on. I've never met anybody in those units that will say, "Yeah, I'm 100%. Every day's great." Why do you think they're grumpy? Why do you think they don't take care of themselves? You know, you are going to be haunted by the things you experience. It's that simple. But I think that, honestly assessing yourself on a regular basis, is this one traumatic event that I recently witnessed is still sticking with me, 2, 3 months later? Really look at those things. And I think it's huge to write keep a journal and just go back, kind of look at the past couple months, like, wow, it's pretty dark. Like, I'm reading my own stuff. Like, this is going off a really dark area. This is not healthy. And once again, be honest with yourself. Okay, what do I do to change that? Well, I start going to therapy, and I start talking about it, and I start, taking care of myself. And as far as, you being criticized or telling people about their diet, right? Cops eat like shit. It's fast food. And I'm not saying everybody, but I did it. I would come home from work in the morning. I knew I was probably going to get 3 hours of sleep, and I'd stop at McDonald's and get a breakfast sandwich, which is like absolutely horrible. Sorry, McDonald's, but it's true. And, you eat garbage. Then you wake up in the morning, you get a bag of powdered sugar, donuts. And then what do? You drink a couple Red Bulls to get yourself ready for work. And you've been at court all morning, and you wake up with 3 hours of sleep, you feel like shit. You throw some horrible food down your throat, you know, fill yourself up with energy drinks, and then go risk your life running on the razor's edge all night, all to do it all over again. You never ate anything that was good for you in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, you eat like shit. Okay. And when you eat like shit, you feel like shit.
Yep.
It's a huge difference, you know. People get, well, there's no other way to do it. Yeah, you have to make time to make your own food if you have to,
Hmm.
and don't eat that garbage, because it does affect how you feel. And then how you feel in your body translates to how you feel in your head. So the brain body connection is a huge thing that once I understood that, everything started to make sense. And when I was going through the effects of PTSD, I was always sore, achy joints. I couldn't work out anymore. And I love to lift. And I just couldn't do it anymore. And I would walk like I was like 75 years old. My knees hurt. And I've had a lot of surgeries. I've had 10 surgeries overall, 3 on each knee, shoulders, and then my wrists, and a lot of that is work related stuff. And with an unhealthy mind, the unhealthy body follows, or vice versa. It's going to happen. And then not eating the proper food is just going to fuel that fire. So I mean, I don't need to tell you this, but you're absolutely right in what you said. I mean,
Yeah.
if and you should listen to people. And if you don't believe them, just do the research. If you don't believe them before you start throwing stones at something you don't know anything about, because you just make yourself look like an ass. And we do that really well sometimes.
Yeah, some people don't realize that stress itself is just inflammation in the body, and they wonder, of course, trauma causes more stress. It's like a cyclical thing, but people don't realize that, oh my gosh, like maybe if I just got some more sleep and did a little bit more self-care, my knees may not ache as much. Of course, with good food choices as well play into that as well. But some people don't realize that the stress might be causing them more physical pain,
Yeah.
than what they might believe.
What I saw with this is that to me it's the perfect example is when like you're, I don't know, high school, college, and you're in a relationship and you break up and your heart literally hurts. Like you have heartbreak. Okay, well, what you experienced had nothing to do it like the way you think. It had nothing to do with my actual heart. It's all up in your head, but then it has that direct, result where your heart actually aches. To me, that's like a perfect example of explaining the brain body connection. So if you're having a tremendous amount of stress that's in your head, your body's going to also have that stress. It's very simple when you break it down to look like that,
Yeah,
but everything we've been told through the years is completely wrong as far as that goes. So if you don't have a healthy brain, you're not going to have a healthy body. And if you don't have a healthy body, you're not going to have a healthy brain.
100%.
Set that in stone, 100% accurate, and start throwing stones because I don't care.
Yep.
Because I know that. I lived it. I lived both sides of it. And yeah, I know what's right.
Yep.
So,
What projects and different things do you have coming up for you? I know you said you're getting into more teaching and training and public speaking as well as what you do with peer support within your agency. So what does that look like for you in the fu near future?
so, my first solo large scale public speaking events in May 5th in Northern Kentucky at a first responder symposium. It's called Tactical Tools for Thriving. Um, I've done that one like 3 years, 4 years in a row, maybe. Um, Most of the times that I've done that, I do it with a doctor friend of mine where we do a cop doc talk where I tell my story and my experiences, and then she gives the clinical side of it and explains the treatment. That one's always been, a lot of people really get a lot out of that one. Uh, this one that I'm going to do is called I call it the 5th of May, and the event's on the 5th of May, but that's not why I called it that. It's just the way things happened. And May 5th of 1979 was the first line of duty death that I experienced that I knew the police officer. I had met him before. He was a friend of my dad's. And that was that moment. And like if you could see it in a movie, like the screen would flash and it would just like be like a bright white light and then life forever changed. So I look at it. I was never a kid again after that day. I never saw the world the same. That now everything that I believed as a kid is now completely gone. So that generated this desire to do a presentation, not only about, you know, trauma, the recovery, the rebuilding, but also draw attention to what first responder kids experience that a lot of people don't see, they don't understand. And the parents that are first responders, they don't see it. I know my dad didn't see it. He was processing his own grief, and then all the line of duty deaths that came after that, we're growing up and we're the first responder kids. We're feeling that too. We're getting that vicarious trauma through them. So I know there's so many things out there for spouses of first responders, but there's not enough out there for the kids. And I think there's a direct connection there where people would always say, well, first responders kids, or especially cops kids, are bad kids. Well, what could contribute to that? Maybe constant stress,
Yeah.
you know, and fear. So that was the whole, uh, inspiration to do the 5th of May presentation. It's going to be like 60 minutes long. It'll be my first one completely solo, other than talking at small like community group stuff. But then I do a lot with dementia training for first responders, which is another example of turning a negative into a positive. I lost my mom to dementia, and I volunteered with the Alzheimer's Association. We started doing first responder training for dementia. And then we took another component of it called Dementia Live, which is an immersive experience that lets you put on goggles, headphones, and gloves, and it replicates what it would be like to have dementia, which totally changes your point of view about what it is and what it's like to deal with somebody that has dementia. And there's also a part in there about when you encounter a caregiver for someone that has dementia. So the caregiver, it's harder on the caregiver than it is on the person with dementia. I saw that with my dad, something I experienced. So we're doing all this training, turning the negative, which was a huge negative in my life, turning that into a positive. So that's what I look at from this, from a few years ago now. Looking forward, everything's going to be from the negative or something neutral to take it to a positive direction. And there's no reason to dwell in the past. You can't change the past, but you can sure as hell look back and think, how can we avoid this, or how can we mitigate some of the horrible things that come from these events. Sometimes I say, just make it suck less. You can't fix it, but let's do what we can to make it as good as it can be with a really bad situation. So there's that part. And then where I am, we have a senior safety program, and it's I'm a senior resource officer, and it's still in a police role, but their elderly people can contact me when they have any issues that regular patrol person may not be able to help them with their problem or solve their problem. And then I respond and I work through situations with them. I build relationships with them. Sometimes I just stop by to talk. Sometimes, I'll do simple things for them, change a light bulb, something that they can't get to. They don't have anybody to do it. Stuff like that. So it's and of course I run into some sad situations, but we make the best of it and we do what we can. I don't think there's anybody else in the country that's got a program like this, but it's been incredibly rewarding and very well received. And like I said, that's one of the main reasons that I say this is the best part of my career ever. I never thought it would be this way. I had no interest in being a policeman again once I retired. It's like, nope, no thanks. And then this came about, and this turned out to be the best period of my life, the best thing I've ever done. So I'm enjoying it. I love it. I like seeing people happy. And you can get confirmation that what you did worked. You see family members call and say thanks, and they say, well, I don't know what you did, but I've never seen mom like this before. She was very upset after dad passed, and she never smiled or laughed, and now she's calling us, and we have a good relationship again. And I mean, that's another one of those great positive things. Negative event, yeah, it was horrible, but we're going to make the best of it, and we're going to bring light to that dark place. And I don't know, I just can't see things in any other way now. Okay, bad thing, let's make it as good as we can, or let's make it great. Let's change the game. And I love doing it.
Yeah, that's so cool. It's so cool to bring it full circle, you're one decision away from a totally different life. You took back control of your life as far as saying, I'm at rock bottom. It's time to do something. It's time to heal. And you use all those experiences to now help other people, which illustrates the we rise by lifting others, but first we must lift ourselves. And you're lifting so many people now, which what you stated at the beginning of the call was helping people to navigate through those dark and toxic times to help them thrive. So you are thriving inside the thin blue line.
Yeah, takes
Awesome.
a lot of work, but it's worth it. And
100%.
the thing is, there's so many great people, people like yourself that are out there and just throwing it out there for what it is, and just being real about it. Like, why are we hiding it? We know it exists. Let's let's hit it head on and blast through it. We're never going to be able to eradicate the toxic environments, but we can change some minds. Once people start standing up and saying this is ridiculous, we're not putting up with this. And at this point in time, we're so short on first responders, police especially. If you have a toxic environment in your workplace, people are going to leave and they're going to find another job. So it's up to you. Do you want to retain people and have a healthy environment and invest in wellness and really support it? Not look at it like it's this shiny new thing. Well, we have a wellness unit too. No, you don't. You don't support it. You don't really back it. So throw some money at it. Go get funded by grants. Change the mindset. People can change their mindset, and foster a positive attitude in a healthy work environment. You're going to retain people, and you're going to get people that are productive.
Absolutely.
And that's the way we've always done it. That doesn't work, and that is, if you say that, I immediately am like, I can't, like, we're not. Yeah, I don't want to hear that again, because that's just as negative gets.
Well, if
Yeah.
anyone wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to connect with you?
LinkedIn, or my email is Perry, Perry at Amberley, Amberley village.org. So I'm pretty much on LinkedIn every day. I don't do any other social media type stuff, but I'm always available by email or on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for spending the time with us all. I imagine this will be
Thank
very
you.
impactful and helpful for those who hear it.
Yep.
Awesome.
Happy to do it.
We'll hang out for me and
Okay.
we'll wrap this up. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to Thriving Inside the Thin Blue Line podcast. I would love to hear your feedback. Please like, subscribe, comment. If there's anything else or other topics you would like to hear on the podcast, let me know. Stay safe out there.